All right, so to get some background, where did you grow up?
Where I grew up in Huntsville, Alabama.
Okay. So why did you decide to come to Vanderbilt?
Well, it was interesting in growing up. I don't know why. I just assumed I'd be going to a girls' school. Nobody told me I needed to, but I thought I would be. So I had applied to a lot of girls' schools. And my brother attended Vanderbilt and was 5 years older than I was. And I came to Vanderbilt my junior year with a friend from my hometown whose sister went here. So we came up for a weekend. And I just thought, boy, this is a great place. My brother got me a date, and we went to a fraternity party, and I just thought, boy, that would be great. So I came home thinking I would really like to go to Vanderbilt. And I got an application, and I was always afraid to fill it out because I'm afraid to be rejected. Well, my mother found the application one day and she said, "I thought you had applied," and I said no. And she said, "Well, you're going to need to do that before you go out tonight." So I applied, filled out my application so I could go out on Saturday night. But anyway, I was applying to the engineering school. And so it really sort of shocked a lot of people that I actually got into the engineering school. But my strong point was math, especially in high school. So that's sort of my path to Vanderbilt.
So you ended up majoring in engineering?
I did.
Mm-hmm. Did you graduate or did you change your major while you were?
No, I did not. I did that as a freshman. There were 13 female engineer students as freshmen in the engineering, in all of engineering school, and that's all the curriculums in engineering. And there were 5 of us that actually graduated of the 13.
What was it like being a female student in the engineering school?
Actually, I didn't feel discriminated against. It's just that back then it was very difficult to cut class, number one, because you needed to attend class every day because the curriculum was built such that you needed to have that every day. And we had X amount of cuts that you could use, but you couldn't sort of not be there and not be noticed, since there are only 15 people in a class or even 10 in a class, and with one female, it's sort of difficult not to be noticed. So,
Right.
yeah. I do tell one, I don't know whether you want to hear funny stories or not, but one of my professors, I think it was junior, senior year, we were talking about graduating and going through getting our grades and everything. And one of the young men in my class went up to him and was arguing with him about the grade that he was going to get for the semester. And Professor Rowan had said, "Well, you never came to class." And the student said, "Well, you told me you weren't going to call roll." And he said, "I told you I wasn't going to call roll. That doesn't mean I didn't take roll." So,
Before we go on, and if you could watch touching your bracelets,
Uh-huh.
because they make a clanking
Oh,
sound.
okay.
And
All right.
it picks up on the other. Okay.
Okay. So was it difficult being like one of the only female students in your classes?
I didn't feel that at all. I just didn't.
Okay. So where did you live while you were on campus?
Oh, all the women only lived in Branscombe
Right.
until my senior year. And then, well, of course, there were girls that lived in the sorority house, but there were only 6 that were in the sorority house. That was top 6 officers. But no, I lived in Branscombe.
Okay. What was it like living in Branscombe? Were there like rules and curfews
Oh gosh, yes.
still?
Oh
Yeah.
heavens, yes. We had a house mother in every of the buildings. Each building, Lupton, Vaughan, Scales, and Stapleton, each had a house mother's apartment, and those are the ladies that would sit at the desk every evening, and of course they rotated to watch us come in, and we had hours that we had to sign in and sign out. We had a sign-out card, and so you had to, past 5 o'clock, you had to sign out where you were going, what time you left, who you were going with, and then you had to sign in when you came back. And that was 7 days a week.
So, and you were what were the rules about visitors, especially male visitors?
They were allowed in the lobby.
Okay.
They were not allowed on the floors at all. And back then, we would have panty raids, and I never will forget Miss Minnick, the assistant dean of women, call me. Happened to be going through the lobby, and she said, "There's a threat of a panty raid. Would you go and stand down by one of the exit doors and tell them they can't come in?" I said, "Well, I'll be glad to go down there and stand, but if they decide to come in, I don't think they're going to listen to me to not come in." But
So that was male students coming in?
well, the male students were coming down from Kassam,
Okay.
so over from Kassam.
So you mentioned a sorority. Were you in a sorority?
I
on
was in a
campus?
sorority.
What sorority?
I was an ale pie.
Okay.
Yeah, although I say I was a better member of a fraternity than I was a sorority. I'm a better alum than I was a collegian.
What was your experience like being in a sorority?
Well, I think this exists a lot today. Is so many Vanderbilt students are so outstanding, and they come from high schools where they were all chiefs. And sometimes you come to Vanderbilt, and some of the chiefs had to become an Indian, and I was one of those. I worked hard in high school, and I had to work doubly hard in college. And I didn't have time for. I certainly made time for a lot of social things, but I had to study. I had to study every night, and I roomed with females that were in arts and science, and they didn't have to do homework as much as I did. I had things every night that I needed to do. So I think that was the hardest thing adjustment that I had to make. But I just thought it was the way it was supposed to be.
Was there still a dean of women on
There
campus at this time?
There was. Dean Cunningham and Dean Minnick were the two heads of the women's, I won't say department, but they were in charge of the female population. And I tell a strange story is that in engineering there's a surveying course that you do outside, and I had to go get special permission to wear slacks to that class outside because it would be in the winter and it was cold.
So there was a dress code, or at least a dress expectation.
Yes.
What was it?
Well, no shorts, no slacks, and certainly we didn't even know what blue jeans were. Only things that farmers and guys wore. There were no jeans back in my day, and even going to physical education, which was required, was over at the Wesley, which is now the Wesley Apartments, across 21st. To walk over there in your gym shorts, you had to wear a raincoat, regardless of what the weather was. And so there were a lot of sort of strange rules that people sort of laughed at, and because Vanderbilt was so strict with the female population, is that girls weren't allowed to wear patent shoes because it reflected their underwear. Those weren't really things that we went by, but we sort of laughed at them.
Was there this idea of a typical Vandy co-ed? I know at one point.
TVC,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Of course, back then the labels were the Villager and Papagallo shoes, and so that was sort of the standard with the Peter Pan collars and the circle pins. And
do you feel like you tried to fit into that
oh,
mold?
of course you did. Of course you did.
Okay. Were you in any other organizations on campus?
I was not. Like I said, I felt myself being a better member of a fraternity because I had a lot of friends in one. But I was not. I really had to study a lot. So.
Did you ever go to fraternity parties? I know we read during the 20s it was kind of like a thing for they didn't want women at fraternity parties. So.
Well, I will have to say yes, I did attend fraternity parties. My senior year, they opened up McTier as a senior girls' residence hall, and we were given extended hours, which we could stay out till 5 o'clock in the morning, but we had to be in, and then we could leave again at 6. What we learned was that there was no place to go after the fraternity party was over because there was another party after the fraternity party that we were invited to, and we were not invited to the second party. So we ended up. It was great to know you had that freedom, but it wasn't something that you really did. You just didn't stay out till 5 o'clock in the morning. There was no place to go.
Did students go downtown like they do now to go?
No. I think the furthest we ventured was to walk to Belcourt Theater, and then there was this little steakhouse. The residence halls cafeterias were closed on Sunday nights, and there was a Crystal and a Tottle House and Chambers Steakhouse. That was sort of the big treat to go down 21st to the steakhouse. But no, we did not venture downtown. I mean, I always made the comment that, you know, third World War could start, and I would have probably heard about it 3 days later, because I mean we were felt very. I felt that we weren't isolated, but you were sort of in our own little world. Mm-hmm. You had everything you needed.
Did you have a separate dining hall for women, or was it just everyone?
No, Branscombe had 2 cafeteria lines, and you could have guests. I can't even remember how you even registered guests for those. I mean, certainly females, but I don't even remember too many males eating over there. But no, we had our own cafeteria lines.
Were meals mandatory?
You had a meal plan. I say a meal plan. I mean, you just went through and you knew that you could get, you know, 3 of this and 2 of that. And, mm-hmm. But it wasn't a formal meal plan like we have now.
Okay. So, but you weren't required to be at the meal?
No.
All right. So how do you think Vandy has changed while you were on campus? Did you
While
see
I was
anything?
on campus? Well, a lot was happening in the outside world. And, of course, we were going through the times when there were protests downtown and curfews that we had to abide by here in Nashville. But like I said, we felt sort of protected on campus, but there was a lot going on outside that we had knowledge of course. I think the students now are much more attuned to the world outside than we certainly were. Well, I'll speak for than I was.
What was the diversity on campus like?
There were not a lot of people of color. I had one African American girl that lived on my floor, I think my junior year. But you know, this was when Perry Wallace was the first SEC basketball player, and there wasn't any diversity.
Did you notice any racism on campus? Was it very prevalent?
Only when, you know, we had protests and things like that. I mean, and we didn't even have protests on campus. I mean, it was what was happening out in the Nashville community and you know, everywhere. But no, I was not aware of those kinds of things going on campus. I mean, our protests were, I mean, silly things like, you know, getting out to stay an hour later if we even did stuff like that. So.
So in the engineering school, were there any female faculty?
No. Mm-mm.
Were there any female faculty that you knew outside of the engineering school?
Oh, you mean in the other curriculums?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure there were. But I mean, I was my day was spent at the engineering school, and I'd really only had to take a humanities course and a science course that was in A&S. So I really did not. The only contact I had with A&S was with the students. And I actually worked for the, I can't even remember what Webb's title was, but I worked in the office there in the engineering school. So and we felt very comfortable around our professors. I mean, they were. I always said it's hard to flunk out of the engineering school if you can get in, because they want you to succeed. They don't give you anything, but they'll do everything they can to help you be successful. And I hope that's the way it is these days. I'm not so sure it is.
Okay, so you graduated in '68,
Mm-hmm.
correct? And then where did you work after?
I worked up in Knoxville. At the time, it was the road department. Tennessee Roads Department, but then it changed to, of course, Department of Transportation. But I worked there in the right-of-way department because I married right out the summer of my senior year. I mean, after my senior year, and my husband was in graduate school there at UT, and so I worked there until he was given a leave of absence. He was on Navy scholarship there here at Vanderbilt, and he got a leave of absence to get his master's. And once he finished his master's, I went with him to flight school in Pensacola, Florida. So I worked there. He passed away. We were married 18 months. He passed away, and I came back to Nashville and sort of got the job with the Department of Transportation, sort of starting back up where I left off. And I've been here. I was there for 15 years.
What was it like dating on Vandy's campus? You said
well, it was really interesting because the ratio to males to females was 3 males to every 1 female. And it was really interesting because, did you ever live in Branscombe?
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, anyway, Branscombe, because that's where all the females were, and a guy would call and say, you know, I need a date for something. He would call. If you're busy, you would just shout down the hall and say, who's not busy and who wants a date? So because they were, and we just sort of shared a lot.
Did you have to? Was there like a limit on how many dates you could have a week, or
No.
Okay. Was it difficult to date with the curfews, or?
Well, I mean, everybody just sort of knew that the way it was. Yeah. Now, we did have curfews, and if you came in after curfew, you got campused. It was sort of the sophisticated timeout, and then you were restricted to what you could do for a while.
Did you ever get campused?
I did get campused, but it wasn't my fault. I had a guest, a girlfriend to come from high school, to come up to visit on a weekend. During the summer before my freshman year, I came to school to get chemistry out of the way. I thought I was getting chemistry out of the way. But anyway, she was late coming in, and because she was my guest, I got campused. So I did not invite her back. She was.
Okay, so you started working at Vanderbilt in 1983.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the hiring process like?
Well, actually, Dean Potter, who the Potter Center is named after, called me up. He and I had sort of a very nice relationship, even in when he was on the staff in the student department of students. Like I said, he was the favorite chaperone at some of the fraternity parties. So we all got to know Dean Potter, and I mean, he's just what a wonderful fellow he is. And when he was, let's see, my husband was president of his fraternity, and got to know Dean Potter because he actually put the Pikes on social probation. Like right at the end of our senior year. So anyway, we all, felt Dean Potter was a friend. And when my husband died, his friends and fraternity brothers, this may be more than you want to know, but his friends and fraternity brothers established, number one, an award that the Naval Division gives to the outstanding cadet in the Naval unit, and then his fraternity brothers also established an engineering scholarship. And so Dean Potter always sort of helped me with those situations, and he would always come to the naval, it's the end of the year, I forget what they call it. But anyway, he would go with me as I would present the award to the outstanding cadet. And when I remarried, I didn't think it would quite right for me to give that award personally, so I asked Dean Potter to do it. So he and I have had just a wonderful relationship. Now, I forgot the question. I got off the track.
The hiring process.
Oh, okay. Well, Dean Potter, then knowing that I was an engineer, called me and asked, he said, do you know any engineers that might be interested in coming to Vanderbilt and setting up a maintenance program for the residence halls? At the time, it was plant operations was in charge, and as things happened, they just sort of didn't have a really good handle on what was going on in the residence halls. And Dean Potter felt that that someone needed to be accountable to the students on maintenance in the residence halls. So he was looking for somebody to do that. And I asked, he asked if I knew of anybody, and I said, well, Dean Potter, what about me? And he said, well, I can't really offer you a lot of money, and it's probably a lateral move. I'd been out of school 15 years. And I said, well, and at the meantime, I'd already married, and even though I was old as I was still would have liked to have had a family. And as a female in the Department of Transportation, to get out of the department I was in to be advanced at all, I would have to leave and come back, because they just didn't have many females, and they didn't want to get rid of the ones that they had. So you were sort of frozen, and I won't say stuck, but you were sort of frozen in the position. So anyway, I said, well, will you talk to me about it? So anyway, I came here, interviewed with Dean Potter, interviewed with Johan Madsen, who was his supervisor, and the rest is history. I've been here 34 years. So
you started out in that position, and then how did you advance to your position now?
Well, I've always been in this position, but I have said that if they had told me that amount of responsibility that I have now, then I don't know that I would have accepted the job, because you just sort of end up accepting more responsibility as it goes along. But I've always been in this position, okay. But the responsibilities have grown.
Mm-hmm. How have you seen Vanderbilt change from when you were a student now that you're on staff?
Oh, gosh. From a student body perspective, I think the young adults are more, I want to say, less rounded in their experiences. I think they come more focused on one particular thing. And I'm not saying that that's bad. I just see that that's a difference, that we all sort of seem to be going in 10 different directions, and maybe not as focused or as driven as and I'm only speaking for myself. I mean, I don't. I'm sure there were some people that were driven, but I just felt like we were less focused on a specific career. That we were getting a college education, and we would sort of go from there. And I mean, goodness, just from a housing standpoint, I mean, the things that we deal with in the residence halls, it's just a totally different world. And we felt ours was a very protected and somewhat sheltered, maybe, and it's just not that way anymore.
How do you think the experience for female students has changed?
Well, I think, but just because the population of females is more than it is male now, I think it's 51-49, something like that. I mean, I think there's no discrimination. There's just as many advantages for females as there are males. I think it's a much more open environment for females. But that's me looking into today, and you young women that are much more driven than I was.
What was your experience as a female staff member?
How publicized is this going to be? I still think that there's a good boy network somewhat, and I've experienced a lot of that the 34 years that I've been here. But I mean, it's something that some people would sort of rebel against it. I just accept it and hopefully deal with it in somewhat of a mature way.
Were you here when the Women's Center was open?
I was. Well, they were beginning to open back. Actually, you know what? Not when I was a student, but I was here back when it began to really evolve as an employee.
How do you think that has changed the experience for female students?
I mean, I'm hoping. I can't speak for a staff member, but I think for a student to know that there's a very safe place, and I guess I don't. I've never felt as a staff member that I needed that safe place. No, but knowing it's there is comforting, and knowing it's there, especially for the students, is very comforting.
What about the opening and kind of also the increased diversity on campus? So like thinking about the opening of the Casey Potter Center and the Black Cultural Center, how do you think that has changed campus?
Well, they're just there were none of those organizations were here when I was a student. There wasn't a need because there wasn't the diversity that was there. I sometimes think that it's a nice thing to have those places to go, but I sometimes wonder if that doesn't isolate them more and not consider a whole population.
So is there anything else that you think is like very significant about your time on campus?
As a student,
As a student.
Or as a student? Oh. There a lot of stories you can tell about, being a female student back then, but I mean, it's just totally different now. And some of them are laughable about some of the rules and restrictions that we had, but you just live with them. That's just the way it was.
Do you want to tell one of those stories?
Well, gosh, let me. Well, I'll tell you one. There was the surveying class that I talked about. There was also the gentleman that taught that class taught a drafting class, and my dad said that if they put grades on diplomas, they wouldn't be framing mine, but mine looked just like everybody else's. And nobody's asked me for my grade point average. But anyway, because of the surveying class, the gentleman the professor that taught the surveying class always took all the male civil engineer students to a summer camp. And evidently it was quite an experience to go. Well, when females began enrolling in the engineering school where they accepting female students, he was not allowed to have the camp anymore, and he did not like that at all. And so I got back my grade in the surveying class, and I really thought, I had a B plus or an A in the class because it was very interesting and I liked it. And I didn't get many of those. It was only a 1 hour course. And I got a D. And because I worked in the office, I went in to see the dean about the grade, and I just said, I don't understand. And he said, just take it and go. And he said he hates females because they have eliminated. And I said, if I'd known that, I'd put my hair in a ponytail and stuck it up in a baseball cap. But you just sort of accepted that. And it's just the way I got a D instead of an A, and I could have used that A.
So there wasn't any mechanism to kind of like challenge the professor?
If there was, I didn't know about it. And I only went to the dean just because I worked in the office and felt comfortable doing that. And I felt comfortable going to my professors with things. I will have to say, the honor code was, I think. Of course, I don't know the way students feel about it now, but it was really enforced. And you just didn't even think about, plagiarizing things intentionally or cheating on a test or so.
Do you think that was like an isolated incident of a professor grading you more harshly, or do you think that was kind of
Well, I don't know that he treated harshly. He just made a statement. I don't like females being here. I don't know. I don't know. I never felt. He was sort of a gruff old man anyway. Man, I will tell you another story about a Professor Bonnie it was a soils class, and this is SOIL, soil classification, and we had a lab, and he was my advisor. And he was just sort of a gruff old man, but his bark was a lot worse than his bite. And he was just, once you got to know him, he was great. And so I was out in the hall. Actually, they didn't have lobbies to their offices, but I was out in the hall, and a young woman came running out of his office, and it was a freshman that had applied, and she'd gotten Professor Bonnie as an advisor, and he walked out and he said, "Ann, go chase her down and explain to her that my bark's worse than my bite, and ask her to come back." So, I mean, that was, it was, we sort of did that. She came back and he just explained that he's just sort of a grumpy old man, and they ended up, her respecting him, and so.
Is there anything else you want to talk about your experience as a staff member?
I don't think so. I mean, I obviously have been happy here. I'm here 34 years, and I mean, I'm past retirement age, and I have a hard time leaving. I've got a great staff, and I just need to make sure that when I leave that there's somebody that's going to take care of them. So.
Okay. Do you know what time it is?
What time is it? 2:40?
Okay, so we still got some time. Okay, so some other questions. Did you ever have concerns about safety on campus? I know that's like a big topic on campus.
Oh gosh,
today.
no. I mean, we were locked up. I mean, when we came in at night, I mean, the doors were locked, but I never felt unsafe walking to class. I did a lot of studying over at St. Augustine's Chapel. They opened that up for study, and so a group of us engineering students. That was just a lot more pleasant than studying in the E School, and it's the old building connected to Feathering Hall. So I was walking back from there to Branscombe. No, I never felt threatened or unsafe, I never hesitated walking by myself.
So you talked a lot about how you studied a lot on campus. What else did you do in your free time?
Oh, well, I mean, at the time there was a lot of activity at the fraternity houses. During the week they would have date lunches 3 times a week, and so you would go to date lunch and just sort of more hanging out at the fraternity houses. Did some studying at at a fraternity house, and then of course then there were fraternity parties, and the upper class. Some of the upper class had cars, so we would sort of go off like a picnic or to the parks. But we like I said, didn't venture off campus too much. I had a sorority sister who lived out in town, and so her mother and father were always gracious to let us sort of hang out there on Sunday afternoons. And but that was really about. I mean, you just stayed on campus.
So you hung out a lot in co-ed groups.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Did you mostly just spend your time at the fraternity houses, or did you hang out in other places on campus?
Well, over in Branscombe, the bottom floor where the lobby is, back where the housing office and my office is now, the big formal lounge, there were little small rooms off to the side called date rooms. Now we call them study rooms, but they were date rooms, and you could invite a young man over and you could study in a date room. And there were, a number of them. And they were just like little nooks off the formal lounge. We changed them to offices now. So we hung a lot out at Branscombe.
Were those date rooms very closely monitored?
We certainly didn't have cameras or anything like that, but there were no doors. It was just a double door opening. It literally was a nook. It might have a lounge chair and a sofa and a coffee table. They were little date rooms. So.
Was there like a staff member in the room to watch you guys?
No, there was a house mother at the desk.
Okay.
Yeah, but we just didn't. I probably was extremely naive, so I didn't think anything was going to happen.
Let's see. Did you ever feel excluded from some clubs on campus?
No.
Like, you mentioned that the summer camp kind of closed down because they didn't want to include women. So were there any other clubs that?
Not that I was aware of, not at all. Now back, and I will say the difference that from now and back then is that the sororities had formals, their big formal of the year, and it was always at their house. And then when the alcohol came into play, most of the sorority organizations and the nationals did not want to, did not or could not assume the liability of that, and that's when the social functions were limited to fraternity houses rather than the sorority houses. So, and actually, when I came back to Nashville, and I was working for the 15 years. 7 of those years, I was a chapter advisor to my sorority, and so I was active with the young women that were there on campus.
Are you still active with that?
Not so much,
Not
no.
so much.
It really I thought maybe it might be a conflict of interest, so I really sort of pushed back. I still keep up with a lot of my sorority sisters, but not as active on campus, or even with the alums. I was younger, but I just haven't been lately.
What advice would you give female students at Vanderbilt today?
I don't know that I would give them advice. I've certainly learned a lot from them, and so celebrate the fact that so many women are very independent, and I like that change, that they assume the responsibility and the independence, and the drive that they have. I don't know that I have anything wise to tell them at all.
So you mentioned that there's still kind of this good old boy problem within Vanderbilt staff. What do you think is like the biggest change that needs to happen?
Yeah,
you don't have to answer.
Well, I hesitate saying
I understand.
I'm still working here.
Yeah.
I may be retiring before I think I'm going to.
Yeah. Okay. What's your favorite memory from your time at Vanderbilt?
Oh gosh, I think friends, and just great times, and I got a great education, and the fact that I was widowed at 24, and I had an education to fall back on, which my parents had always emphasized that, an education is something that no one can take away from you. And I certainly learned that very early on, is that I had something to fall back on when my life sort of went in a direction I didn't think it was going to. And I've been very, very fortunate to be able to keep up with a lot of people, and a lot of it means that because I've been here in Nashville all this time, that the 15 years before I came back to Vanderbilt, that I've been able to keep up with a lot of Vanderbilt people that I went to school with, and every year I feel like it's my reunion year, because I always sort of know somebody that has come back. And my brother was 5 years ahead of me, and so we sort of overlap, and we have a grand time coming back to homecoming and sharing things with everybody, and it's just neat relationships that you've made, and with people like Steve Caldwell and Dean Potter, we still keep up with them. So I just went to Steve's 70th birthday party.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, it's just pretty neat.
Okay.
I just told how old he was, too.
We didn't hear you.
We're proud that we're as old as we are. So I can't think of anything else that I'll probably think of 10 things when I get back to my office. I should have written down some of the things, but I always said that I wish I could have started a book 34 years ago about some of the students and some of the parents of students and the things that we've dealt with within our office.
Is there an example you can give?
Well, there's one that particularly comes to mind is that we got a call from a young man's mother that was living in Gillette, and she said, I need this tree cut down because he doesn't get enough natural light in his room. And I said, well, let me check things out. I said, you understand that he chose that room to live in. And she said, well, I just didn't think he knew that there was a big tree behind. And so I got my staff member and an RA to go over, actually it was an area coordinator, to visit the room. And so they knocked on the room and heard some scuffling around in the room and knocked on the door again. And we knocked 3 times, and then we announced that we're going to key into the room. And we opened the door, and there was this just real funny light in the room. Well, her son did not need any natural light because they were growing their plants under grow lights. So how do you go back and tell the student's mother that the tree is not really important to her son? So there are things like that. They're just there's just lots of funny stories and I wish I'd written them all down.
Yeah.
So.
How do you think the opening of Commons has changed the experience for first years?
Well, let me ask you. I mean, you lived at the Commons.
Mm-hmm.
How did you experience that transition of being a freshman in an all-freshman campus and coming onto the other side of campus?
It was really great for me. It's hard because I don't have the perspective of what it was like before, but it was a very smooth transition to come and have a place where when you walk around, there's other first years and you can just talk to them. And the dining center really helps because people, that's one of the few places on campus where you're sitting and eating alone and someone will come and join you and start up a conversation. So I think for people who are coming here for the first time, it's a really great place to
Well, good. I mean, and I think that was the purpose of having a freshman experience. And I know when we started talking about residential colleges, the comment was made that we didn't necessarily want a residential college, so to speak, for freshmen, but to have the experience, a very unique freshman experience for Vanderbilt. And I think the university has done that. I think the Commons has been that, and it gives us a venue for sort of training students as to what's expected and giving them a safe place to learn how to be a successful student. And that was the intent, I think. And in comparison to what it was when the community was all, just a female community, and we all lived in Branscombe, and we sort of all knew each other. We were upperclassmen and freshmen together. I think I did on my freshman year. I think we did have all freshmen on my floor, but I mean we still had upperclassmen in the residence hall, so it's very, very different. But I think I like the transition that this has made.
Did you feel like because you lived in a women's dorm, that was also a supportive community because you could come in and it was
Sure.
Was it a close knit?
I mean, and absolutely. I mean, when the doors locked down, and I mean there was another. It was we all would be out in the hall, talking about the night and who you saw and what you heard, and I mean it was just sort of winding down, and it was a great atmosphere. Yeah, and a lot of people criticize the Cassam, the old Cassam, where it was all single rooms, and of course Branscombe was always the popular place to live. But when I had other colleges and universities coming to visit Vanderbilt to talk about facility issues, I would take them to Branscombe, and we would go up on a corridor in Branscombe, and there might be somebody wandering around the halls or something, but we would take them down to Cassam, and because everybody was in a single room, people had their doors open, and it was more of a community, and a lot of students, when they got assigned to Cassam, would grumble and mumble and stuff, but it was really more of a community than even Branscombe was. And it was very interesting to see the difference, because once they got down there, they liked it. And I'm sort of disappointed that they got rid of that first, but just the environment between those two complexes was very, very different. So.
Did they have a group like, we have VU Scepters now in Vanderbilt Visions. Was that there when you were a kid?
No, we didn't. I didn't have a VU Scepters. I think the RAs at the time were more our VU Scepters and the person that we would go to that sort of, I say that we had a freshman orientation. We didn't come in the summer. We came a week before classes started and a week before the upper class got here. So we had a whole week that we had things to go to. You walked around campus, found out where your classes were. We had a freshman dance. And so, I mean, we had a week to get to know each other. And I'm sure we had some people helping us do that, but it wasn't formalized in separate groups.
Where did you find kind of support on campus? Was it like your house mother, the dean of women, your RA?
I think it was more RAs. I remember talking a lot to my RA on the floor. Not that I had any issues, I just got to know them. Because nobody wanted to be called into the dean's office. But like I said, I had to visit the office to get special permission to wear the slacks to the class, and I also had to go because my freshman roommate was having some issues and ended up leaving, and they called me in to talk to me about that. But I mean, I don't know that I ever felt like I needed this. I did. I'm sure there was support here. I just didn't need it and didn't seek it out.
So did you live with roommates your whole time at Vanderbilt?
Did I what?
Live with roommates?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well,
the other interesting thing about it is that we had Saturday classes, and it wasn't until my second semester senior year that I did not have a Saturday class. So.
Was that throughout the whole school or just in the engineering
It was
school?
the whole school.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. You were going someplace else, and I remembered that. So.
I was asking you about roommates.
Okay. I had actually I met this young woman in summer school. I mentioned that I came to summer school before my freshman year, and I met her, and we asked to live together, which probably ended up not being a good idea. But she was in nursing, and ended up leaving the first semester of our sophomore year. And so I had a roommate different each year. I moved in with a sorority sister after she left. I lived with an independent, and then I lived with another engineering student my senior year.
Was that a good support system, I guess, or at least close friendships?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And with your sorority as well?
It was. The two of my roommates were sorority sisters, but it wasn't. I thought of them more of as a roommate than a sorority sister, because we had groups within the sorority, and we weren't necessarily in the same group in the sorority. The sororities were a lot smaller then.
So is Greek life different today, you think?
Oh gosh, yes. The groups are so large that I can't imagine even learning everybody in your class, much less the whole sorority.
Were most female students in a sorority at the time?
About 50%.
Okay.
So, and I always said that it really didn't. You didn't have to be in a sorority to be accepted or popular. Back then we had the Lady of the Bracelet and Bachelor of Ugliness, and the lady of the bracelet 2 years was an independent, and I mean, but we all knew them. I mean, we got to know them because there were so few of us that we were all knew each other.
Will you talk more about those two events? What were they? Can you explain them?
Well, they're most. It's sort of like our outstanding senior. It was a senior woman and a senior man, a male. And I think we voted on them. I can't remember. But, I mean, it was never, oh, gosh, how did she get that? I mean, everybody sort of, I remember our senior year, her name was Roz, and she was a nursing student, and everybody knew her. I mean, she was just, a great person and outstanding in her own way, but was an independent.
So you called independence?
Someone that was not in a sorority. Uh-huh.
Right.
And I mean, one of my years I lived with a girl that was a nursing student that was an independent. And, I mean, I took her to, most of my functions at the sorority house I didn't take her to the meetings. Who'd want to go to those? But, I would take her to a lot of the activities and I mean, that was normal.
So the other event was it Bachelor of Ugliness?
Mm-hmm.
Was that the male version of Lady of the
It was.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know where that name came from.
But it was.
He wasn't ugly though, but he was very handsome.
Was it worn with pride? Was it like the,
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was the top honor.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were there any other similar programs? There's something called like Charm, I think, or.
Well, I mean, they had in the there were. I mean, of course, the fraternities all had their sweethearts, and then there were, oh gosh, I can't remember the term they used, but some females that were sort of elected to be, I guess, show up in an evening gown and have their picture taken and presented at the annual, but I can't remember what that was. But I mean, there were things like that, but it was, like I said, I can't remember whether it was voted on or.
So, what were the fraternity sweethearts?
Yeah, it was just the group would pick some female to sort of be their hostess at things, and I mean, it was an honor. I mean, to be selected to be that.
Was that always a member of a sorority, or was
no,
it?
No.
Interesting.
Mm-mm.
Oh, I think we're out of time.
Okay. All right.
Is there anything else you want to say?
No, but I was going to say I'll probably remember 10 things that I should have told you.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you was, did you have any contact with Dean Cunningham?
Dean Cunningham?
Mm-hmm.
I did a little,
Mm-hmm.
but most of my contact was with Dorothy Minnick.
What was the difference in their roles?
Dorothy Minnick was more the assistant,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of I felt like probably dealt with more of us than Dean Cunningham did. She was more administration, and Dean Minnick was what sort of had to deal with all of us. So, but Dean Minnick was one that when Branscombe was opened the year before I got here, she got to pick out some of the furnishings and things, and she had bird cages in the lobby with really birds in them. I still have those bird cages downstairs. Anyway, I said I've been here way too long. Okay.
All right. I think we're done.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Oh,